I was buying my fiancée her dream house, but she asked me to include her brother on the deed. I later found out he's actually her ex and first love, and she had been lying to me for years. I'm a 30-year-old man who has been with my fiancée, Thea, who is 26, for over 5 years. We first crossed paths at a restaurant where she had just started working behind the counter, and I had gone with a friend to place an order. From the moment I saw her, I couldn't take my eyes off her. She was breathtaking and had the sweetest voice. After we placed our order, I couldn't stop raving to my friend about her beauty and how captivated I was by her. He encouraged me to ask her out, but I was too nervous and afraid of rejection. Summoning my courage, I wrote my name and number on a piece of paper and slipped it to her when I picked up our food. She blushed when she saw the note. That evening she called me, and we talked for hours as if we had known each other forever. She's the first person I'd ever met who has made me feel this happy. Her presence brings endless smiles to my face. My parents and sister have met her and they like her just as much as I do. Just to give you some background, Tina and I come from very different backgrounds. Tina's childhood was exceptionally tough. She grew up as an orphan because her mother abandoned her as a baby. She had no name, no records, no birthday, nothing. Throughout her childhood, she never got adopted and moved through numerous foster homes, many of which were traumatic. Tina has only one cousin, her brother Kyle, who discovered her existence and reached out to her when she was 16. They have since become incredibly close. From the beginning, Tina made it clear that her brother was the most important person in her life. Having an older sister myself, I understood that sibling bond deeply. The challenge arose when Tina frequently canceled our plans on short notice to spend time with Kyle. She explained that they both suffered from separation anxiety, which was evident in how she often prioritized him over our plans. We had discussed future trips, initially planning them as just the two of us, only for her to suggest bringing Kyle along. On one vacation, Kyle called her for no apparent reason, and she panicked, feeling compelled to rush back home because he wanted her there. She consistently reiterated that he was her number one priority, leaving me with an unsettling feeling that even in marriage, I'm gonna always come second to her brother. It felt as if I had to compete with him, which was an odd and disconcerting sensation. To make matters worse, he often called her during our dates, leading to 15 to 30-minute phone conversations that disrupted our time together. When I first met my girlfriend, she lived in a small apartment with 2 roommates. Her brother Kyle often found reasons to stay over. Once, when I FaceTimed her, I saw him sleeping next to her, which made me extremely uncomfortable. I questioned her about it, and she explained that he usually slept on the sofa in the living room. But that night, he didn't want to be alone because he was going through a tough breakup. I expressed my discomfort about her sharing a bed with another man, even if he was her cousin. She argued that the sofa bed was uncomfortable and that her bed was more spacious for the two of them. I pointed out that it seemed odd for him to keep crashing at her place when I never did, and instead of staying with a friend, he preferred to spend the night with her. Tina dismissed my concerns, saying I was overthinking it and that it wasn't a big deal. She explained that I wouldn't understand because my relationship with my sibling was not as close as hers. My upbringing was different. I grew up in a wealthy household with 2 loving parents and an older sister I was close to. Learning about Tina's childhood, where she never had a stable home, broke my heart. I always tried to shower her with love and affection. Our relationship was happy, and after 7 months of dating, we decided to move in together. When Tina's lease was ending, she asked if she could move in with me since I owned my home and was already paying a mortgage. From the start, I've always financially supported her because of my well-paying job, which earns in 6 figures, and she was aware of this. Initially, I considered asking her to contribute to the rent, but I felt guilty, so I decided against it. At the time, she was still studying, so I covered all her expenses, including books, food, gas, and other daily needs. It wasn't my favorite arrangement, but I loved her and knew she needed the help. I convinced myself that it would be worth it once we both graduated, secured good jobs, and became more financially independent. However, conflicts occasionally arose. Since I was covering all the expenses, I felt I should have the final say in decisions. One weekend, Tina invited Kyle over, wanting me to bond with him as he had been eager to come and drink. I agreed and even bought a few cans for him. When Kyle arrived, he completely ignored me and went straight to hug Tina, leaving me feeling sidelined and frustrated. They hugged for an unusually long time, and then Tina introduced me to Kyle. I offered him a polite smile, but he showed no emotion. He then plopped down on the sofa and commanded Tina to get him a few drinks. I was taken aback because I had never spoken to Tina that way. Throughout the night, Kyle was exceptionally rude to me. For instance, he wandered around our house, implying that I was a lazy bum who relied on my dad for everything. I corrected him, explaining that I had worked hard in college to land my well-paying job and that I was independently paying the mortgage on the house. He scoffed and then boasted about his recent promotion. For context, he had worked at a restaurant for 8 years and was promoted to manager. While Tina and I congratulated him, he ignored me and instead told Tina he wanted to take her out to dinner since it had been a long time since they had spent time together, and he missed their long drives. Tina agreed and they reminisced about their shared memories, which made me incredibly uncomfortable. My girlfriend noticed I wasn't having a good time and was being quiet, so we went to my room to talk. Our discussion apparently took too long, and Kyle barged into the room, yelling for Tina and expressing how much he missed her. Tina assured him we'd be out soon, but he insisted we hurry. Frustrated, I told him to leave. I was growing increasingly annoyed with his clinginess towards Tina, and it puzzled me that she didn't see it. After we sorted things out, we decided to go back downstairs, not wanting to keep Tina from her brother. She stopped to use the bathroom, and I waited in the hall. From there, I could hear Kyle yelling at our TV, sounding completely drunk. I realized he had been drinking continuously since he arrived, having already consumed almost 6 cans. When Tina came out of the washroom, Kyle began lamenting that he wished they had met at a bar and had a good time together since being at our place was boring and he wanted to go out. Tina must have noticed he was quite drunk and suggested he rest a bit since he had driven. Drunkenly, Kyle continued, expressing his disdain for me and wishing I had never come into his life. I was furious and didn't care what might have prompted him to say such things. I demanded to know what his problem was, as it seemed inconceivable for a brother to be so overly involved in his sister's life. Kyle responded by yelling and attacking me. I'm 6'3" and much taller than him, so I had to restrain myself from seriously hurting him. Tina was begging me not to retaliate while he continued to hurl obscenities at me. In a moment of frustration, I gave him a single pinch, and he was knocked out cold. Tina screamed, accusing me of having killed him, but he was only unconscious, and she checked his breathing. I suggested he could sleep it off on the sofa until he felt better. Tina then turned to me, declaring what I had done was unforgivable. I told her if that was the case, she was free to leave. I watched her eyes fill with tears, but I was too exhausted to argue further, so I went to my bedroom and fell asleep. The next morning, Kyle was nowhere to be found. When I asked Tina, she told me he wanted her to apologize to me for last night and that he was not pressing any charges against me. I scoffed and told her that her brother was lucky I didn't press charges against him since he was the one who attacked me. Drunk and dismissive, Tina brushed it off and apologized for getting angry at me the previous night, which I accepted. Since that incident, Kyle had avoided me as much as possible. Tina continued to see him every weekend, but he never crossed paths with me. By the 3rd year of our relationship, I was seriously worn out from being the sole financial support in our home. She expected me to cover all her school-related expenses, despite having her own savings from various part-time jobs. Around that time, I noticed her growing sense of entitlement, as if my support was a given. When she finally landed an internship, I hoped she might become more financially independent. However, she spent her money on luxury items like shoes and handbags, accumulating many pairs she rarely wore and a couple of high-priced handbags, while I still covered all her essentials. Our arguments intensified, often revolving around her telling me not to dictate her choices and me feeling like I was dealing with a spoiled child. I felt obligated to care for her. Almost a year after her graduation, she still hadn't secured a job, and her self-esteem was shattered. In the first 5 months post-graduation, she had given it her all, but the constant rejections had taken a toll. What really frustrated me was that I had suggested she take a part-time job during this period to earn some money, but she never pursued it. During this time, even though she wasn't earning a penny, Tina would constantly spend money on her brother or send him $1,000 every month. When I questioned her about it, she would insist he needed the help and argue that I was earning more than enough, so I shouldn't be selfish. This infuriated me as she was spending my money without my consent and expected me to be okay with it. Admittedly, I didn't help the situation. My frustration from supporting her and her brother had been building up for quite some time, and it all came to a head. The breaking point came the night before her school loan and phone bill payments were due when she called me asking for help. I lost my temper, yelled, and called her an ungrateful person who used me for money without making any effort herself. I told her our relationship was a sham, that I deserved better, a true partner, not a spoiled child. I confessed I had been contemplating breaking up with her. She immediately started sobbing and apologizing, telling me she was going to do better and that she had no idea I felt this way. She felt terrible for what I had been going through. Since that conversation, she has kept her word. She started looking for another job, reduced the financial support to her brother, and began contributing to the bills. For the first time, I felt much better about our relationship, knowing she was now an almost equal partner. I decided to propose to Tina in September last year, with plans to get married in June this year. She accepted and we shared the news on social media. However, when she was heading to visit her brother one weekend, I noticed she had removed her wedding ring. When I asked her about it, she explained that her brother was very sensitive and she wanted to break the news of our engagement to him gently. I laughed, wondering why it was such a big deal, but she asked me not to interfere, saying that he was her family and she knew how to handle him. Given her relationship with her brother, I decided to let it go. I wanted to do something special for us, so after reviewing my finances, I realized I could buy the house I currently lived in and rent it out to earn some income. I thought it would be a wonderful wedding gift for both of us and a fresh start together. I even spoke with a realtor about checking out some beautiful properties. Thea was thrilled when I shared the news with her. She hugged me tightly and said she couldn't wait to start the next chapter of our lives together. Over the months, we've been searching for our perfect house. Thea had many opinions about the houses we were considering and wasn't ready to commit. However, we eventually found our dream home with a spacious backyard, exactly what we wanted. It's about an hour and a half from my office, and Thea mostly works from home, so it was perfect. Since I was buying this house for us, I planned to have both our names on the deed, but Thea had an issue with this. She insisted that, since I already had one house in my name, I should put her name and her brother's name on the deed for this house. I was taken aback and asked if she was serious. Why would I include her brother's name on our house deed? Thea explained that she had no assets of her own because she had no parents and she felt insecure about bringing nothing to the marriage. She wanted her name on the deed to feel more secure. Regarding her brother, she said he was extremely important to her and she wanted him included since he was going to be family. I refused and we had a massive argument. In the heat of the moment, I told her how strange it was for her to constantly bring up her brother and how her relationship with him seemed to cross boundaries, even though I had a sibling. Thea burst into tears and walked away from me. Later that night, Thea brought up the issue again, insisting that I should add her name and her brother's name to the house deed. She argued that it was the right thing to do and emphasized how much it would mean to her to include her family. She kept pushing the matter and I kept shutting her down. The tension between us grew with our discussions looping back to this demand. It felt like an endless cycle, with her stressing the importance of including her brother in our home ownership and me struggling to understand why this was even a consideration. I was caught in a whirlwind of confusion, frustration, and increasing unease about the situation. Last week, I ran into Thea's best friend, Betty, at a coffee shop near my office. Betty was having an interview nearby. I've met Betty several times in Thea's presence. They've been friends since college. Thea doesn't have many friends, so Betty and she are very close. Betty congratulated me on the upcoming wedding and teased me about becoming a married man. I awkwardly smiled and she asked about our wedding plans. I found myself struggling to answer truthfully. During this conversation, I started questioning whether I had made the right decision in asking Thea to marry me, given our ongoing fights about the house deed. I couldn't discuss this with anyone because I didn't want my sister or her parents to form a bad impression of Thea. Sensing my discomfort, Betty pressed for more details. Unable to hold back, I decided to share the whole story about Thea's strange request regarding the house deed. I told her how Thea was insisting I include her brother's name and refused to back down. Betty's eyes widened in surprise and she said that this was really strange. I told her that this was exactly how I felt. For the first time, I felt validated that someone else could see how odd my fiancée's request was because it felt like I was losing my mind. Betty then hesitantly asked if I knew the full story about Thea and her so-called brother Kyle. I shook my head, confused. That's when Betty revealed the truth. Apparently, Kyle wasn't actually Thea's brother. When Thea was growing up in various foster homes, she met Kyle, who was also an orphan. They became very close and started introducing each other as brother and sister to others. With no family of their own, pretending to be siblings gave them some comfort and stability. However, as they grew older, they realized that their relationship seemed odd to others. Kyle would often interfere in Thea's relationships, and her exes didn't like having him around. That's why Thea started telling people that Kyle was her cousin, to make it seem like they were actually related. This arrangement allowed them to hang out and spend time together without their partners having an issue with it. Betty mentioned that Kyle's girlfriends would also have problems with Thea, but once they learned she was his sister, they would generally be more accepting. As Betty shared these revelations, a mix of shock, confusion, and a hint of betrayal swept over me. The foundation of trust that I thought our relationship was built on began to crumble. Betty continued, expressing surprise that I didn't already know this since Thea was engaged to me. She had expected Thea to have come clean about it by now. I shook my head, telling her that Thea had never mentioned any of this to me, and I had been under the impression that she was spending weekends with her brother. Betty nodded in understanding and admitted that she had also found their relationship too close, but she felt it wasn't her place to judge, so she had kept her opinions to herself. Since my conversation with Betty, I've been struggling to keep things normal with Tina because I'm unsure how to bring this up. My mind is racing and I'm at a loss for words. I'm afraid to confront her and discover that she has been lying to me throughout our entire relationship. This situation has me questioning whether I can ever trust her again. I am torn about whether to end my relationship with my fiancée because of her dishonesty regarding her brother. Should I give her the benefit of the doubt for the years we've spent together? Please, Reddit, help me. Update 1. Thank you for all the advice. I now have a clearer idea of how to move forward. I've always tried to turn negative situations into positives and to avoid acting out of negative emotions, which was challenging over the past few days. For most of those advising me to end the relationship, I believe that's the best course of action. However, before making any decisions, I need to have an open discussion with Tina to hear her side of the story. I need to understand why she lied to me, as it will haunt me otherwise. I've also reached out to my parents and shared everything with them. They echoed the sentiments in the comments. They don't want me to go through with the marriage, and they're relieved that Tina and I aren't tied together through property or finances, making it easier for me to end things. I'll update you once I confront her. Update 2. So I finally sat down to talk to Tina yesterday. Confronting her was both nerve-wracking and essential. I needed answers, and I owed it to myself and our relationship to uncover the truth. I didn't hold back and told her up front that I had met Betty, who revealed everything about her and Kyle's relationship. Tina's eyes widened in shock, and she asked what exactly I meant by that. I told her that I knew she and Kyle were not cousins, and he was not her brother. Tina looked taken aback, her eyes darting nervously around the room. She stammered for a moment before trying to explain. She admitted to the lie about Kyle being her brother, justifying it as a coping mechanism from their difficult past. She shared how, growing up in foster care, they had found solace in creating a bond that was more than just friendship. When they grew older, they realized that people judged them, so to avoid judgment and interference in their relationships, they decided to present themselves as cousins to prevent unnecessary complications. Listening to her, I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and sadness. I couldn't understand why Tina hadn't been honest with me. It wasn't just about Kyle not being her biological brother. It was the years of deception and the strain it had put on our relationship. I told her that we were about to get married, and she had knowingly continued to lie about him being her brother. When I pressed her about the demand to include Kyle in the house deed, her justification turned into an emotional plea. She claimed that he had been her constant support and anchor, and including him was a symbol of what families do for each other. I pointed out that I was going to marry her and start a family with her, yet she seemed to prioritize a guy she met in foster care over me, her actual partner. Tina began to cry, insisting that their relationship was purely platonic. This made me laugh, and I told her that Kyle's behavior around her was far from platonic. I questioned her about whether she had been sleeping with him behind my back, but she vehemently denied it. I pressed her, asking if she and Kyle had ever done anything romantic. Breaking down, she finally admitted that he had been her first boyfriend, and they were each other's first. She explained that it was for a very short time, and they broke up immediately when they realized they weren't right for each other. She kept insisting that they only loved each other platonically now. My patience snapped, and I could no longer accept these excuses. I expressed my disgust at the lies she had told throughout our relationship and told her that I could no longer be with her after learning the truth. This made her cry even more. She began to say that this was why she had been hiding the secret for so long. She tried to guilt-trip me, saying that I was leaving her just like her mother did years ago, and that she couldn't live without me. I told her that I couldn't continue the relationship, that the foundation of trust had crumbled irreparably. At that moment, I no longer cared about her feelings and asked her to return my engagement ring. The ring, a family heirloom that had once belonged to my grandma, was given to her with my mother's blessing, with the hope that we could start a family together. But now I was done with her, and I didn't want her to take the ring with her. She begged me not to break off the engagement, but I stood my ground. Then Tina refused to return the ring, claiming that since I had given it to her, it now belonged to her. I reminded her that what she had done amounted to catfishing, depending on me financially and lying about her so-called brother. I told her she was not leaving my house until I had my ring back. Reluctantly, she removed the ring while crying and accusing me of being heartless. I asked her to pack her bags and leave within the hour. Despite her pleas and promises to change, I remained firm in my decision. The person I thought I knew was a facade, and I wanted nothing more to do with her. Desperate, Tina called Kyle to pick her up. When he learned that I was aware of their relationship, he refused to get involved, perhaps fearing a confrontation with me. Tina had no choice but to call an Uber. As she left, she apologized for everything and said she would wait for me. I ignored her and shut the door in her face. The aftermath has left me with a whirlwind of emotions, betrayal, heartbreak, but also a newfound clarity about what I need and deserve in a relationship. It pains me that the woman I once saw as my dream girl turned out to be such a fraud, and now, in my 30s, I have to start the dating process all over again. But I'm grateful that I discovered her true nature before we got married or bought the house. Otherwise, this could have turned into a much bigger mess. Update 3. Thank you to everyone who has sent me uplifting messages over the past month. Your support, especially those who shared their own experiences with infidelity or offered advice, has been invaluable in helping me navigate this difficult time. Following many of your suggestions, I have decided to go for therapy. I know that with time, this pain will ease, but it still stings deeply. My sister and parents have been a tremendous support, checking in on me regularly. I have blocked Tina on all platforms and changed the locks on my door, as some of you advised. Additionally, I have installed cameras around my house for peace of mind, although I doubt Tina or Kyle will show up again. This will be my final update for now, as I want to move forward and not dwell on her betrayal.